Councillors, can I have your attention, please? I welcome you all to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council and now declare the meeting open. Due to the current COVID-19 restrictions, we are unable to have a public gallery present, but the meeting is being webcast live over the internet so that members of the public are still able to watch these proceedings. So I acknowledge those people listening in tonight. Moving on to the prayer, I ask Councillor Graham Moore to say the prayer, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the betterment of the peoples of Cardinia Shire. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Apologies, I note that we are all in attendance and we have no apologies. The items withdrawn for discussion this evening are the following. Items 5.1, amendments to Planning Permit T190304, issued for the use and development of the land for dog breeding, to increase dog numbers for commercial breeding and include additional buildings and works. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Moore. I understand you have an alternate motion, Councillor Moore. Thank you.
I have just that, Mr Mayor. I propose that this application be deferred for further consideration at the Town Planning Committee meeting to be held on Monday the 1st of February next year, the following year. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ross. The mover to speak, Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are a few questions that need to be answered on this particular application that I'm not particularly satisfied with, and I think that it's better we defer this and be sure of this application in its full right. So that's why I'm deferring the item until next year, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I go to Councillor Ross as the seconder to speak. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I concur with Councillor Moore that this is a very big issue. It's got a whole lot of community interest in this space as well, and there's been a whole lot of issues brought up about this. I think it does need more time to go over it properly and get some more information to have a look at it as objectively as we can. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers, councillors? Any other councillors wishing to speak to this item? There being none, I'll just go to Councillor Moore to sum up. Thank you.
There's nothing further to say, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, councillors, please indicate by show of hands. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Carried. Moving on to the next item, which is item 5.2, 33 Henry Street, Caretakers, development of the land for a rooming house and associated works. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Brown, who has also got an alternate motion to move. Thank you, Councillor Brown, to move that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council refuse planning permit T200473 for development of the land for an accommodation building, rooming house and associated works at 33 Henry Street, Caretakers, on the following grounds. The proposal is contrary to section 60(1)(f) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 and clause 65 of the planning scheme, as it will have a significant social effect. And also the proposal is contrary to clauses 16.01-1s housing supply and 21.03-1 housing of the planning scheme, as the design is not integrated with the surrounding area and is poorly located. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Davies. Moving back to the mover, Councillor Brown to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As well as those planning considerations, this also is really a social issue. The residents of Caretakers, particularly those in Henry Street and also the surrounding areas, are very concerned that this rooming house has been inflicted upon them. They had no prior notice, nor were they entitled to any under the state government planning policy that they can just decide where rooming houses go, and they don't have any obligation to notify the residents. I have a petition, and I believe council has been given a copy of the petition of some 80 or so residents that have indicated their opposal to the rooming house on the grounds of insufficient parking. There's only 4 parking lots for a 9-bedroom house with possibly up to 12 residents in that house. There is also the potential to have up to 4 people per room in the house, which is of further concern. And also, rightly or wrongly, the residents have a perception of the inhabitants of these particular houses, sometimes being of an undesirable nature. There could be reformed drug addicts, people who have social issues, mental issues, but more importantly, from my point of view, is the fact that these people will be put in an area with no wraparound services. We're going to be pulling people out of an area, putting them into a rooming house, and we're going to be saying to these people, make a life for yourself, here's a roof over your head. Now, if they have to have appointments to see counsellors or see their family, it's well known, or it should be known, that Caretakers has very limited transport options, very limited social interaction or wraparound services in Caretakers for these people to access. And my thoughts are that people will try to attend their appointments, realise how difficult it is to get there and back, and then don't go to their appointments. And for some of these people, they have to have this wraparound service for their own welfare. The residents are, to put it mildly, frightened. They're frightened of their existence, they're frightened of their surrounds, they're frightened of the people that may go in the area, they're frightened that their way of life is going to be turned upside down. This may not happen, of course, this may not happen, but there is the possibility that it will. And I think it's our opportunity as a council to say, look, we're listening to you, we understand. We may not agree with everything you're saying, but we do understand that you are or have concerns about this rooming house, and we'd like to stand with you. So, councillors, that's why I'm asking for your support tonight to refuse this permit, because I think it sends a message. It sends a message that, as a council, we have not been consulted as well. We may have had plans for that area, but without consultation, and it could happen to other towns as well. So I think it gives us an opportunity to raise the dialogue, to at least have the conversation with the state government or the planning people that make these decisions. And by refusing this planning permit, I think this brings this to the fore, and it will be cause for conversation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Moving to the seconder, Councillor Davies. Thank you, Councillor Davies, to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. My reasons for supporting Councillor Brown's alternate motion are largely specific to Caretakers. Caretakers is a fantastic township, but as Councillor Brown alluded to, it's transport challenged. There's very little public transport, and whilst this development would allow its residents to perhaps be able to walk anywhere they needed within Caretakers, parking's not provided for the majority of the dwellings, and they're also expensive for people that might be homeless or might be in social housing for a range of reasons. Interestingly, the majority of homeless people across Australia is it's single women over the age of 50. They're not bothering anyone. They're largely, after a lifetime of caring, just not financially secure. And whilst I understand council, with respect to its policies, am incredibly supportive of a society that does provide social housing and low-cost housing, and also connect people to strong communities such as Caretakers. This development, specifically the significant number of rooms without any caretaker facility, without ample car parking, it's problematic, and I support Councillor Brown's notice to refuse the planning permit on those grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this item? Thank you, Councillor Kowazik, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support Councillor Brown in his motion tonight, but my reason for supporting Councillor Brown is that Caretakers does not have the infrastructure in place to support a development of this type. However, I just want to briefly mention I do take issue with some of the statements made in a very, very small number of the objections. I'd like to remind people to remember the golden rule: treat others as you wish to be treated. Some of the rhetoric and assumptions made about the potential residents of this facility was disappointing for my mind. I hope that people who made such comments are never in a position to need accommodation of this nature themselves, and that if they are, negative and disrespectful assertions aren't cast on them in the same manner. To put it plainly, if you assume the worst of someone, then expect them to act accordingly. And if you need evidence of that, in the Gazette, there was photos of the protesters there. Most of them doing the right thing, most of them no problems at all, but a few of them had signs that said no syringes. So they're straight away assuming that the potential residents of this facility would have prior drug problems. And I just think that I don't like the line that that community is taking with that. And again, it was a very small number. Most of the objections referred to the infrastructure. And so that's what I'm basing my support of Councillor Brown on tonight. I just want to quickly mention as well, the more research and reading you do, the more you'll find that social and affordable housing actually works. It puts money back into the community by taking the strain off of other services and gets people back into the workforce. It also enhances people's sense of community spirit, particularly the residents within these facilities, as their immediate community has shown faith in them, and that helps to build positive and strong relationships from the get-go. As long as it's in the right setting, which is pretty relevant to tonight, it's socially and economically the right thing to do. I know this council particularly, is supportive of social housing and it being done appropriately, and I hope in the future we can meet this obligation, particularly considering the state government's investment in this area. Thank you. And I would would quickly like to, in the event that this motion is lost, I wish to foreshadow approval of the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kowazik. Any other further councillors wishing to speak? Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm in support of Councillor Brown's motion, but following on, I'd like to quickly go over some of the issues that have been presented. Now, we've got a 9-room rooming house that's been planned, and looking at the plan in front of me now, there's only enough room for a bed, probably a storage with a bookshelf and their wardrobe. There's no room or space for other people to be in those rooms. So that's one issue that I think we need to look at, that the planning there in a lot of these rooming houses, if they say one person, they mean one person. Parking doesn't mean to say that everyone has a licence or able to afford a car. So the majority of people that go into rooming houses don't have cars because they don't have the money for them. I do agree that limited transport within Caretakers is probably one of the biggest issues, but then that applies to everyone that lives in Caretakers, the same as all the services. It applies again to everyone in Caretakers that has to go to services outside of Caretakers. So it is an area that it shouldn't probably be in. It's not the best place. But again too, I take offence to people labelling people that they don't know and making judgment on people that are down on their luck. We don't know what their background is, and we don't have the right to judge them, the same as people don't have the right to judge us. And I'd like to say that, you know, we all would like to be treated fairly, and so we need to treat these people fairly. And I think with their mental health, people labelling them is not going to help them in whatever their situation is. And it's not necessarily that they're drug addicts, it's not necessarily that they're alcoholics, it's not necessarily all the other things that people seem to be putting out there, especially in some of the petitions that I read and some of the phone calls I've had. I've worked in rooming houses, but as I pointed out to council this evening, they were called SRSs, and they still are SRSs in the city, and they do work if they're in the right area. So on that note, we need to look at better areas for rooming houses to be built or established. And under the livable plan, we're only, for the affordable housing, it's only applying to women and children at the moment. So we do need to look at some areas for men and children, because it's a different society nowadays, so we need to cover all, and we need to be having equality within Cardinia Shire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Any other speakers? I note Councillor Jeff Springfield. Thank you, Councillor Springfield, to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we did receive a number of objections to this, and as Councillor Kowalczyk pointed out, some of them, were quite emotive and perhaps, cast in judgment, which I find to be unfortunate too. But there's been some criticism too, Mr. Mayor, of council not notifying residents and such of this. But what I think residents probably don't understand is the planning scheme it allows for certain elements and others it doesn't. So I'd like to quote something from the report, which says, for public notification and pursuant to clause 44.04-6, yada, 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 the proposal is exempt from the notice requirements of section 52(1)(a), (b) and (d) of the Planning and Environment Act of 1987. And the only reason that there is a planning permit trigger for this is pursuant to clause 44.04, land subject to inundation, a planning permit is required to construct a building. So there is no requirement to issue a planning permit in order to have a rooming house such as this, even with the size and the density that it's stated. And so our officers work underneath the planning scheme in order to deliver the best outcomes as prescribed in the planning scheme. So I think this is probably highlighted. I believe there's a gap in the planning scheme to probably properly address the concerns that have been raised, and legitimate concerns towards meeting the wraparound services that many of these residents would require, and public transport and such. So I hope that further consideration in the future will be given by the state government towards the planning scheme to address these facilities being constructed and built in the most appropriate areas to meet the best outcomes of the wider community as well as the residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeff Springfield. Moving on to Councillor Graham Moore to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly support Councillor Brown's motion tonight to refuse this particular planning scheme. I'd like to, just on the back of Councillor Springfield's comments, of course, when there's 39 objections or submissions to an application, we have to sit up and listen. Really, you have to. With the community safety, lack of public services, and particularly without a 24-hour police station within that region, is a major thing to have in that area. But the residents have got to understand, and what I don't understand, and they will understand this, that there was no advertising of this particular application. The way that the residents, the 39 objectors found out, was a letter from one of the residents, thankfully, that was sent to the neighbourhood of that Henry Road, which is a fantastic thing for them to do. But there's been brought upon by the Victorian state government's, it's what's called the Homes Victorian policy, it's called, which is addressing, of course, and we understand, we've got policies of our own that addressing homeless, affordable housing, those type of things. So we understand what this policy is about, but it's been thrust upon us really. And it's been an opportunity for a developer or owner of a property to pick this development up, this Homes for Victorian policy, which encourages dwellings and residential diversity in established areas. And Caretakers is an established area, let's face it, but it lacks those services we've mentioned before. So I can understand why we have to look at this closely, because this will be only maybe the first of many that we might have to face across this council chamber in the future. And maybe the next ones might be in an area where the services are there and these rooming houses will be perfectly ideally suited. So therefore we've got to be prepared for those. And I think, but this one is we're going to listen to the neighbours of this fantastic town of Caretakers, and I'm certainly against it. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this item, either for or against? Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with my fellow councillors on this issue, and I support Councillor Brown and his alternate proposed motion. It is so important to have these support services that are connected to these sort of things like rooming houses, because without those, if you have people in need, it just makes it so hard for them to get that need. And I know on council we have a social and affordable housing partnership group who meet on a regular basis, and they talk about services being so important to those people who live in those homes, that they do need them from time to time, and also too they're just there to help them and look out for them. I must say council is a huge supporter of social and affordable housing, and we have a policy that we put through late last year which shows our support for it. We put our money where our mouth was, finding locations within Central Ward which were close to support services, connected to groups who did the development, that had all the wraparound services with them. And we have 2 of those projects that have been built and are up and running, and we have one that's coming. So anyone who thinks that council doesn't support these sort of things would be sorely wrong, because if they actually look at what we do as an interface council on the boundary of the urban growth, on the fringe of the urban growth boundary, we're actually one of the ones who take on pilot projects in this area. I must say, unfortunately for the people putting the application up here, when you look at the services that aren't there, when you have a look at the neighbourhood character of the area, you have a look at the parking, and you have a look at all of those incidentals, it's the right idea. And there is a need in Cardinia Shire for this, but it's just the wrong location with the lack of services connected. So I would encourage the applicant, even though if it gets knocked off today, to look for a more appropriate place to build something like this with the right services, because we are a council who does support this sort of thing. Unfortunately, this time, this is the right idea with the right need, but the wrong location with those things. So anyway, I won't be supporting the replication. I'll be supporting Councillor Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers at all? There being none, I will go back to Councillor Brown to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Davies for seconding the motion. I forgot to acknowledge you. Thank you for doing that, and I appreciate the comments of the other councillors. Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillors, I put the alternate motion of Councillor Brown's up for voting. Please indicate by the show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to the next item, which is 5.4, which is application T200500 Army Road, Pakenham, use and development of the land for a place of worship and associated works. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Kowaczyk. Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk. Moving on, calling for any seconders. Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk, to speak to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Ryan for that second. Anyone who lives on Army Road knows this site's been vacant for so long. The owners have actually had it for 32 years, since July 1988. I'm going to support the officer's recommendation, so I just wanted to make note of a couple of things. I wanted to note the large setback of the building, which is 44 metres from Army Road and 81 metres from Murphy Road, which will reduce the footprint and impact on neighbouring properties and residents. There's extensive landscaping to be done with strict conditions, so that's important to note. As part of the application, the applicants will also be constructing a 1.5 metre wide footpath along the entire site frontage to Murphy Road, which will add to the infrastructure of the area, and also a 1.5 metre wide concrete pedestrian path, including pram ramps, to link to the existing pedestrian path on the eastern side of Army Road. I just want to let residents know there's a number of other conditions and restrictions on the site to ensure appropriate development and use. I believe it'll add to the amenity of our local area. The building will actually blend in nicely as it will use similar materials to existing houses in the area, that being brick facade and a colour-bond roof, and it will be single storey, which I think is important. Trees will be planted along frontages along Army and Murphy Road to the full extent of the application area or building zone and not outside of it. There was some confusion around that. This will help screen the building and be another positive to our local environment. However, this is a difficult decision, and I note the objections regarding traffic and noise. With regard to traffic, there is extensive on-site parking. I believe 64 car park spaces will be provided as part of the application, which will eliminate the need for any street parking. Also, the entry will be from Murphy Road, which will avoid the queues on Army Road during busy periods. With regard to the noise, normal noise restrictions will apply, which means that on-site acoustic testing has been completed to ensure that it complies and limits impact on neighbouring properties. There's also in the report a permit condition which states that there'll be no amplified music whatsoever after 10 p.m. Monday to Saturday and 9 p.m. Sundays. I'd also like to note the objection of Julie Haddock, who I spoke to today, who claims she wasn't properly notified during the advertising stage and went out of her way to letterbox the surrounding properties in case they too were missed. I thank Julie for doing this, as her sense of community helps to ensure communication regarding this application is open and transparent, which is something I value very highly. So thank you, Julie. This site is a vacant lot, so any development will add to noise and traffic in some sense. I think it's important to note that. It's also important to note this is privately owned land, and I thank the council officers for the conditions attached to this application, which ensure it's developed appropriately and with consideration of nearby residents. The plans go a long way to addressing any concerns I've heard and have been voiced to me, and I encourage all residents that if they have concerns to read through this report, which addresses them on a point-by-point basis. I also want to note this fits in with the Planning Act, which states that residential areas are ideal to house places of worship as they are there to service their members within our community. And finally, I believe the applicants and users of this facility will abide by the conditions in the report and be respectful of the community around them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kowazik. Moving on to the seconder, Councillor Ryan, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'll be supporting Councillor Kowazik. Did I say it right? Motion. Looking at the report and also knowing the area very, very well, you're right, that vacant lot has been there for a very long time, and the community up there has wondered often what it was going to be. So now they're finally finding out, which is really good. The only concerns that were relayed to me in reference to residents was the hours of operation. Monday to Thursday, 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. 6 a.m. is their prayer time and their prayer learning, and they do this before school, so it's only a few students. It wouldn't be completely full with the car park full as well. So, and I suppose it'll be one of those things, wait and see what happens when they go into there. But I don't have any concerns about that. I think they're very responsible people. They're very respectful with their community around that environment. The only other things that I was concerned about is the trees on Army Road. I hope that they're not going to be removed because they're beautiful trees there, and it would be a shame to have to replace them. The traffic is going to be havoc because we also have a school right opposite, and in the mornings and afternoons it's a very, very busy place. So I see that Kennedy Drive will be probably just as busy once construction starts to happen there. So they will be concerned because we also have a bus route there as well, so and a parent zone. So there is going to be a lot of traffic during that time. But depending on when they're starting, when their builders are coming in, it could work. So I don't have any other concerns, and I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Any other councillor speakers? Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to congratulate both councillors, Councillor Ryan and certainly Councillor Jack Kowazik, for your presentation this evening. Really well done. I just like to say it's really great to see this footpath is going to surround both in Murphy Road and around in Army Road, as well as this 1.5 footpath. There's one footpath that we don't have to do ourselves, Mr Mayor, which is really great to see, and really great to see that on the plans. But the bit that I really do like is the structure. The structure of this building really blends with the actual the surrounding areas. I think if you're talking about character, it's really pleasing to see a structure of this nature that really sits in with the environment of that area around the Pakenham Hills Primary School. It's right opposite there, so it's I know this block of land myself. I've been here for a long time too, Councillor Ryan, and I've seen that block of land and wondered the same thing myself. So it's pleasing to see that seeing this developed, and I'm 99% sure those trees will remain in the front there, Councillor Ryan, and so that's an important part of the conditions that's involved in this development. So it's pleasing to see, and I will happily support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other further speakers? Thank you, Councillor Ross, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be supporting Councillor Kowazik's motion here too. I must say, personally knowing this group through the Cardinia Interface Network, who have put up the application to build this premises, you would not meet a more respectful group of people who want to get along with the community. You can go and approach them at any time and talk with them. They are amicable people. They will do the best they can to appease any concerns people have. And they've displayed that over the 12 years that I've known them. They've been involved in all the community events that the interfaith group have been involved in. They've actually led the interfaith group. They were one of the foundational groups who were part of the interfaith group as well. I must say, as far as respect goes, that you could really, you could use that as their main title. They're very, very respectful. I must say they've had another location in Pakenham for it has to be over probably about 10 years. I have never ever heard of one complaint from their location at that point. In fact, they work with other people and allow them to use their car parks when they're not using them. So they say we know people by what they've done and the whole lot of it. And in this case, I have no problem with it. I think they'll be a real asset to the area, and I'm sure if they can help people in the area, they will be. So I just approve this, and I hope Council approves it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers? Before I do that, I just want to say some brief comments. I also support this application. I commend the applicant on providing more car parks than what's required as per the Act. I commend them on that, because as stated previously, we've had other circumstances where reductions of car parking has been given, and that causes issues, particularly for the abutting neighbourhood. So I commend the applicant for going above and beyond what the Act says, and I think that's has real good merit. So I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Kowazik, to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Moore, for your kind words, and thank you to my fellow councillors for your comments. I'm of the belief that the trees on Army Road will remain in place as part of this application, but I agree, Councillor Ryan, that's very important to me also, because they're beautiful old trees and we don't want to see them go. So just to quickly sum up, I'll be brief. Numerous restrictive conditions ensure this development is done appropriately and the use remains as intended. Development must start within 2 years of the permit being issued and completed within 4 years. This aims to ensure the applicant gets the ball rolling within a reasonable amount of time, so that's another positive. And ultimately, this report and the conditions coming from it represent a compromise and a willingness to work together from the owners and the council. So this is a good outcome for the owners and the neighbouring residents, because I really think that this development will be done in the right way, and I think everyone will be pleased with the result at the end of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kowazik. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, councillors, please indicate by show of hands. Thank you. That's carried, unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to the last item that has been withdrawn. That is item 5.5, which is the planning permit application for the use and development of the land for rural industry and a caretaker's dwelling associated with industrial hemp at 565 Murray Road in Vervale. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Brown, who has an alternate motion. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council issue a notice of decision to refuse planning permit T 190712 for the use and development of the land for rural industry and caretakers dwelling at 565 Murray Road, Vervale, on the following grounds. 1. The caretaker's house is not reasonably required for the operation of a rural activity being conducted on the land. 2. The proposed manufacture of hemp-based building products is an industry's use that is prohibited in the Special Zone Schedule 1 and Clause 51.02-2 of the Cardinia Planning Scheme. 3. The proposal is inconsistent with Clause 22.05 of the Cardinia Planning Scheme because it does not support soil-based food production, does not support the existing vegetable industry, and does not have regard to the role of the Western Port Green Wedge in maintaining food security. 4. The proposal is inconsistent with the objectives, land use policies and the precinct vision and future directions preferred land uses of Clause 22.05 of the Cardinia Planning Scheme. 5. The proposal will have the potential to limit the operation and expansion of adjoining and nearby agricultural uses and is therefore incompatible with adjoining uses. And 6, the proposal is inconsistent with the purpose and decision guidelines of the Special Use Zone Schedule 1. 7, the proposal is inconsistent with Clause 21.04-2 of the Cardinia Planning Scheme. 8, the proposal is inconsistent with Clause 14.01-1S of the Cardinia Planning Scheme. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Can I have a seconder for that alternate motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Kowazik. Moving back to the mover. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. There are a lot of grounds there for refusal. However, I will focus on item 1, the refusal that the caretaker's house is not reasonably required for the operation of a rural activity being conducted on the land. I refer to the Special Use Zone Schedule 1. It applies to a large portion of the Cardinia Western Port Green Wedge. It recognises that soil is a finite resource and inappropriate use. Development of subdivisions will result in the permanent loss of this valuable resource. I have selected 3 of the purposes of the zone to speak about. Number 1, to preserve land of high agricultural quality for horticulture and other farming activities. An example of this would be to discourage non-essential buildings being erected and dams constructed causing loss of productive land, and to discourage non-agricultural and non-soil based uses establishing on soil of high agricultural value. 2, to protect the area from the encroachment of urban and rural residential type development. These small acre allotments are attractive to those seeking a rural residential lifestyle, particularly if they can build a house, call it a hobby farm or what you like. In this particular area, there are dozens of 20-acre allotments, literally dozens of them, which would be very, very attractive if somebody all of a sudden built a house on one of them. 3, to minimise the potential for conflict between residents and normal farming practices that are related to the conduct of agricultural activities. An example would be the proposed caretaker cottage is a large 4-bedroom dwelling with garage attached, and together with rural industry shed comprise a large footprint and roof area. The close proximity to their neighbour on the east boundary, who are generation farmers farming 100 acres of cabbage, silver beet, coriander and asparagus may be cause for conflict. Farmers farm by the light. As soon as it is light enough, they start their tractors and machinery and usually shut down when the light fails. Most farmers fertilise by broadcasting chicken manure. The smell can be overpowering and hangs around depending on the weather conditions, and it is not pleasant, I can assure you. And to have a house in close proximity is not nice, or would not be nice. The crops are sprayed by pesticides. This is reserved for very still days, but even so there is the occasional drift. This may settle on the roofs of the dwellings and shed, and after rain will probably pollute their water tanks. In fact, it will. Just some conflict examples, but they are real when you put a residential dwelling in the middle of farmland when these activities are going on around them, and farmers have a right to farm. So after all that, what is the proposal? Well, the application seeks approval for the use and development of the land for rural industry and a caretaker's dwelling. The whole basis of this enterprise is growing industrial hemp externally on the site. The crop will occupy approximately 77% of the site, 6.25 hectares, the buildings and dam occupying the rest of the site. Included in the application documents is an authority that has been granted to grow low THC cannabis issued by the Department of Jobs Precincts and Regions dated 29th of February 2019. This authority has 1 year remaining on it. The approval has a 3-year expiry, and the application states that there is an assumption that there are opportunities for renewal. I'll say that again. There are assumptions that there is an opportunity for renewal. No guarantees. This could come up for renewal in 12, 13 months' time and not be granted. The caretaker's dwelling is proposed to be located 23.8 metres from the eastern boundary and 29.8 metres from the front title boundary. The building comprises a kitchen, living, dining area, bedrooms, bathrooms and a garage, not a small dwelling by any means. The building will be constructed using screw piles, and the plans show the location of cut lines. A septic area will be in front of the building. It is noted that this dwelling will accommodate the applicant's entire family, as this to be a family-run enterprise. It is claimed that the caretaker's dwelling is required to establish the crop on the site and for security purpose and run the rural industry component. The facts are the applicant has been granted an authority to grow this crop 2 years ago. At the moment, there is no security fence and, of course, no caretaker's dwelling. So obviously, the security aspect of it is placed in pretty low importance by the authority issuing these permits. And of course, the rural industry component is an 8 to 4 Monday-Saturday operation and can easily be managed off-site. Councillors, this planned caretaker's dwelling requires a high degree of scrutiny by Council, considering its accommodation aspect and strong emphasis in the planning scheme to ensure land in this special use zone does not become used for rural residential purposes. Council must have a high degree of confidence that the dwelling is justified and the enterprise is viable, noting that a dwelling is prohibited land use under the Special Use Zone 1 as the site is less than 10 hectares. I note the justification for a caretaker's resident in the consultant's report, Improved Ag and Environment, dated 26th of September, which mentions hemp twice and does not focus at all on security. Of course, there are enforceability issues associated with the caretaker dwelling, conditions if you like. The use development of the caretaker's dwelling cannot commence, and a building permit must not be granted until such time that the agriculture operation considered under the permit application, industrial hemp and rural industry approved under this permit, are established to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. I have trouble understanding what that means. Does that mean that it meets the objectives of the business plan in respect of yield per acre or sales, or the successful commercial manufacture of hempcrete, and then the applicant apply for a building permit. It's very vague as to what that means, that the satisfaction of the responsible authority. Who is going to make that decision? Who is qualified to make that decision? Do they go along and see that the hemp's growing? But then again, they've got to look at the rural industry. Is that set up? Is that going to be viable? Once the planning permit has been issued and the house is built, well then that enterprise must continue. Of course, the Part 2 of the Schedule 1 of the Special Use Zone requires that the owner must enter into Sections 173 agreement, which requires that the caretaker's dwelling must be removed when no longer in use. In other words, if the crop or rural industry does not continue, that house has to be removed, Section 173. The report also acknowledged that this could be challenging, but states that this is the only tool available to ensure it is removed when no longer in use. In such an event, this would require involvement from Council's Planning Compliance Department. I will leave it there, Mr Mayor, for others to speak if they wish.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Moving to the seconder, Councillor Kowazik. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Brown. I support Councillor Brown and thank him for the extensive knowledge he brings regarding the area of the application and also the particulars of a caretaker dwelling. I support the industry surrounding the application as it is environmentally friendly when compared with a previously used material, foam, which is widely used to clad buildings. Hempcrete is certainly a more environmentally friendly version of that. However, I share Councillor Brown's concerns regarding the dwelling and its justification. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kowazik. Moving on to any other further speakers. Thanks, councillors. Councillor Davies to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to express my appreciation to Councillor Brown for his leadership and analysis of this issue. There has been a very active applicant who has got in touch with every councillor and made a case. And I also read in detail the council officer's assessment and deliberations on this matter. Whilst hempcrete is a great innovation, there are significant flaws with what is being sought in this process, and I do commend Councillor Brown on the position he is presenting for council. And in the event that Councillor Brown's motion doesn't take course, I would like to foreseeably propose the support of council officers' recommendations, which was to grant a permit with very stringent conditions, just as an alternative in case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies, and I note that you're foreshadowing a motion if this one is lost, so I note that. Thank you. Any further councillors wishing to speak? I note Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just short and sweet, as I am. Not sweet, short. I just thought I'd like to mention, I also support Councillor Brown's notice of decision to refuse. And mainly on this, the big contention is this caretaker's house. I've got no problem with the product, no problem with the farming there, that's fine. I would like to see the applicant do a year or at least one crop or two crops to see that this can be actually grown in this location and justifiably have a humble dwelling, I call it. This is not a humble dwelling. This is an actual pretty big property house, this is. And if this fails, I find we have a lot of trouble with this Section 173 to remove houses in these circumstances. And so therefore it makes me a bit nervous that if this crop fails and it doesn't come up to scratch, the house is going to stay there and there's going to be a 20-acre property amongst other farms that are doing using proper farm machinery, and it gives them the right to farm. They've got a right to farm. And if you put a residence in amongst those land in those special use zones, there's spraying, there's machinery operating all sorts of hours 24/7, to the point where our compliance people would be all over this like a rash. There'd be complaints everywhere because they've got a residence right amongst all these farming areas. So I support Councillor Brown here. I'm in awe of Councillor Brown, actually. what a wonderful report, Councillor Brown, and it's I actually I didn't have much to add in there, Councillor Brown. I want to thank you for what a great effort under the circumstance, because it's a pretty emotional application, this, and it's been around for a while between you and I, when it was used to be Port Ward once upon a time, and it was in Port Ward at the time, and it was there then. So it's been carried over into this circumstance. So well done, Councillor, and I hope that everybody gets behind Councillor Brown with this refusal, because I certainly will be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any further speakers, councillors? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Brown to sum up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, for your comments, and Councillor Moore, I don't know how to take that compliment. I don't get many from you, so I'll have to think about it a little bit more. Yeah, okay. As Western Port Councillor, which is predominantly rural, I have a strong interest to ensure that the agriculture and horticultural viability of this high-yielding farming area is safeguarded. I have other concerns with this enterprise zone. Whilst not the direct subject of the planning permit, is the nexus for the secondary and third element of the permit, that is the rural industry and also the caretaker dwelling. Some issues that I have that I can't get away from is the authority to grow has been issued for nearly 3 years, and it has for 2 years, sorry. It has a 3-year expiry. There's no guarantee it's going to be renewed. The feasibility, one of the consultants, Planet Rural, on 26 July 2020 has contacted Melbourne Water and established the site is not within an irrigation district. The same consultant in November 2020, last month, there is no evidence of a secured water right to ensure the success of the project and viability of the business. This is in the report, and you all have access to that report. The capability of the applicant, the same consultant, there is no information available on the capability of the applicant on previous experience in cropping production, hemp farming, or farming in general. Also, no evidence of experience in product development of hempcrete. And there are no plans evidence to manage the byproducts or effluent resulting from hempcrete production. There is obviously going to be waste product when you're mixing hemp with water and all those types of things, and there's no plans how this is going to be managed out of this highly delicate zone. And I guess, responding to Councillor Moore, questions by this same consultant, if you like, questions why there's not been a trial plot established on the site to measure potential yield. So strange that there has not been an attempt to even try to grow this. So there are doubts on what the business case is based around, because there's been nothing to measure the yield on this particular crop. I support hempcrete. I think it's the next best thing. What it does for the environment, the CO2, the massive uses that this industrial hemp can do with the fibre. It's a great product, and apart from the dwelling, if it was only the rural industry, I think that we would get a different result here tonight. Unfortunately, the consultant's report also raises other areas of concern that I do not think have been adequately addressed. I would suggest that the applicant use the remaining time on his authority, 1 year, to grow a crop, obtain a 3-year extension as presumed, secure a water right, then reapply for a planning permit for the rural industry. Councillors, I seek your support in refusing this planning permit T190712. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillors, I put Councillor Brown's alternate motion up to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you. Against? Unanimous. Carried. Thank you. That concludes discussions on the items withdrawn. May I have a mover, please, to adopt the officer's recommendations for items 5.3 and 5.6. Thank you, Councillor Davies, moving that. Seconded by Councillor Ryan. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for your interest in watching tonight's meeting at home, and thank you, councillors. Just a reminder that we have our December General Council meeting next Monday, the 14th of December. So I now declare the meeting closed. Thanks very much. Thank you.